Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are plunging straight into the shadow world of one of the most highly debated intelligence agencies on Earth. We'll be digging into our source material to uncover their philosophy, their most audacious missions, and how they manage to operate completely out of sight. It's going to be a wild ride.
Picture this. It's May 1960 in Buenos Aires. The darkness hasn't quite set in yet. A tired-looking factory worker steps off a bus on Garibaldi Street, carrying a small bag, just heading home on his usual route. But tonight's a little different. 8 shadows are quietly trailing him. And these aren't your local Argentine police or American agents. Nope, they belong to a nation that, at the time, was barely 12 years old.
15 years. For a decade and a half, that unassuming factory worker was actually Adolf Eichmann, the brutal logistical mastermind of the Holocaust. He had completely vanished, successfully evading global authorities like the US, Germany, and Interpol. Our source details how he lived a quiet life under the fake name Ricardo Clement, and how these covert agents pulled off what literally no other intelligence agency could. So how exactly did a small team capture a ghost? Well, let's look at Section 1, the origins and philosophy. Imagine trying to build a nation when you're vastly outnumbered by your neighbors. Even before Israel was officially on the map in 1947, its leaders knew that just having military force wouldn't be enough to survive. They had to know their adversaries better than the adversaries knew themselves. So, formalized in 1959, the agency adopted a biblical motto from Proverbs: "By deception, thou shalt do war." And this wasn't just some catchy slogan, It was a pure survival strategy. They built units like the Mr. Veem, agents who grew up in Arab countries, speaking the language flawlessly and understanding every tiny cultural nuance. That deep immersion, that became the absolute bedrock of how they operate. To ensure that survival, they structured their mandate around 4 core pillars: intelligence gathering, justice for the Jewish people, neutralizing military threats, and rescuing refugees. Today, we're going to objectively examine these 4 pillars by looking at 4 unprecedented historical operations documented in our sources. Let's jump right into Section 2, capturing Adolf Eichmann. Tracing his path reveals a pretty chilling timeline. After escaping U.S. custody in 1946 and landing in Argentina in 1950, Eichmann remained entirely hidden. That is, until a crazy tip in 1957. A blind Holocaust survivor's daughter started dating a boy who, believe it or not, proudly bragged about his father's Nazi past. Talk about a massive red flag. This sparked a highly secretive surveillance operation where undercover agents spent months meticulously tracking Eichmann's clockwork daily bus routine, just to be absolutely certain it was him. Once they had their confirmation, the extraction was unbelievably daring. I mean, they couldn't involve the Argentine government, so they just bypassed them entirely. First, they actually grab him right off the street and hold him in a safe house for 10 days. Then, to sneak him out of the country, they sedate him, dress him up in a white shirt and dark jacket so he looks like a sick member of an LL flight crew, and literally smuggle him straight through airport security onto a commemorative flight back to Israel. Just wild. The whole thing culminated in the 1961 trial in Jerusalem. Eichmann faced a highly publicized trial, famously sitting inside a bulletproof glass booth that was broadcast to the entire world. The source notes that this resulted in Israel's only civilian execution in its history. It sent a massive, undeniable message, really cementing the agency's commitment to long-term retribution. All right, moving on to Section 3, the 9-minute nuclear sabotage, where we look at neutralizing military threats. So, in late 2006, some really alarming whispers started emerging in the Middle East about a highly secretive Syrian-North Korean nuclear pact. To get undeniable proof, agents pulled off a flawless digital heist in a 5-star London hotel. While a Syrian official was out grabbing dinner, agents broke into his room. They pick the lock in just 40 seconds. They install custom tracking software on his laptop, and they extract with zero trace. The entire operation took exactly 9 minutes, and they left the room looking completely untouched. The intelligence they pulled from that tiny 9-minute window was absolutely staggering. The laptop data yielded over 700 photos and blueprints, which revealed an exact replica of a North Korean nuclear reactor being secretly built in the Syrian desert. But of course, they needed physical proof. So Israeli commandos actually infiltrated Syria by helicopter under the cover of night, took some incredibly dangerous on-the-ground soil samples, and found radioactive material that traced directly back to North Korea. That brings us to September 5th, 2007, the 20-minute airstrike. When the U.S. declined to intervene militarily because of the ongoing Iraq War, Israeli jets basically said, okay, we're doing this alone. They used specialized electronic warfare to jam the Syrian radar systems, rendering them completely blind, and then reduced the clandestine Al-Kabar reactor to rubble in just 20 minutes. Just like that, a massive national threat was permanently erased without triggering a larger war. Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, the Ghost Terrorist. To understand why this militant commander, Ahmad Mugnia, was such a top international target, you really just have to look at his devastating track record. He orchestrated bombings at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut in April 1983, the Marine Barracks later that year, which killed hundreds of Americans and French soldiers, and the AMIA Cultural Building in Buenos Aires in 1994. Acting essentially as a one-man army, he constantly altered his identity with plastic surgery. He managed to evade global intelligence for decades by living under extreme paranoia. So, how do you catch someone who basically doesn't exist? Well, in 2008, agents finally tracked him to a mandatory funding meeting in Damascus. The setup was surgically precise. A Mitsubishi Pajero, explosives secretly planted right inside the spare tire hub, and a remote detonator. After a 25-year manhunt involving multiple international intelligence agencies, his reign ended with a single button press on a dark street in Syria.
Now let's shift gears completely for Section 5, the fake diving resort.
I'm not gonna lie, this next operation sounds like it was pulled straight out of a Hollywood spy thriller. Back in the early 1980s, Ethiopian Jews were facing severe famine and persecution in Sudan, which was an enemy state to Israel. To rescue them, agents set up the Arrows Holiday Village. By day, it operated as a fully functional luxury scuba diving resort for European tourists, complete with actual diving instructors. But by night, it transformed into a covert refugee smuggling hub. Under the cover of darkness, the resort's senior staff, who were actually undercover agents, would drive hundreds of kilometers in trucks to these super dangerous refugee camps. They'd pick up the Ethiopian Jews, drive them all the way back to the resort's beach, and load them onto waiting naval boats. Over the course of 3 years, operating right under the nose of the Sudanese government, they successfully smuggled over 6,000 refugees across the Red Sea to safety. It's truly mind-blowing. Finally, we arrive at Section 6, the price of espionage. When you take a step back and look at the whole picture, the scale of this organization is staggering. The source estimates their staff at around 7,000 to 10,000 people. Compare that to the CIA's reported 21,000 plus. Despite protecting a nation of just 9 million people, this relatively small intelligence apparatus executes these massive global operations. It's a level of success that really comes down to a deeply ingrained philosophy. For them, this isn't just a job. It's an intense, historical mission born entirely out of survival. Yet behind all these extraordinary, movie-like acts are everyday people, the unnamed agents. These are individuals living completely in the shadows, leaving their families behind for months at a time, operating under false identities without any public recognition. No medals, no glory. They are the unnamed shadows we saw on Garibaldi Street. As we wrap up this explainer, impartially reviewing these covert assassinations, digital heists, and dramatic extractions leaves us with a really profound dilemma. Does a democracy have the right to speak the same language its enemies use against it? Where exactly is the line between justice, law, and raw survival? Take a moment to think about that. And as always, keep questioning what you learn.